Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold.
Hey everyone, welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ashley Ross. Dr. Weinhold, how are you doing today?
Hi, Ashley. I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited about this episode. It's one that personally I've had a lot of experience with, and also professionally working with people who have issues around betrayal conflicts.
Wonderful. I'm really excited for it too. I think this is a topic that a lot of people could relate to.
Yeah. And so I'm anxious to help people in the audience get more real in their relationships and tame their inner demons. And the first step in taming their inner demons is naming them. When you can name it, you can tame it, as I say. And
Exactly.
so that's one of my goals today will be to put some more meat around the whole concept of betrayal, what it means, how it happens, and how it affects relationships, and what to do about it.
That makes a lot of sense for a continuation. So what are you going to share today about the betrayal in couple relationships? I'm really interested in this topic myself.
People, when they think about betrayal in couples, they always think of sexual infidelity, the biggie.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously I've had clients who had to deal with that. And
Sure.
I've helped a number of clients deal with that highly successfully in their relationship. So they didn't have to end the relationship. But I found, and often couples don't see this, there are many other forms of betrayal that aren't as dramatic as that. And I've kind of put together a list of 12 common kinds of betrayal that we don't necessarily pay much attention to. And so here's 12 acts of betrayal that could be worse than sexual infidelity. And I'm just going to read a couple of them, and maybe you'll get some idea what I'm talking about here. When a person gives up on the relationship for no reason and says, and the person may say, I'd rather have him cheat on me than hear him say, I don't love you anymore. And that's an ultimate kind of betrayal that I think is even more devastating than a sexual infidelity. Colluding with another person about our relationship problems before you came to me would hurt me more than cheating. And that's a form of betrayal, is sharing things with someone else about your relationship without your partner knowing that, or without permission to do that. And so that's another kind of betrayal. Ripping me off financially. Cheating, depending on the context, just says, I wanted to get you out of the relationship, and I hope I could get away with it by ripping me off, saying, I'm willing to compromise your long-term well-being in order to better my own. And that kind of betrayal just destroys relationships. And so on and on and on. There's 12 of them. I won't necessarily read all 12 of them. I don't have time. But you get the idea that there's other kinds of betrayals that, as we scroll down, you can see, maybe stop it for a minute, let people read the last ones there. And the last one is telling me he doesn't like me as a person anymore. And those kind of betrayals are devastating to relationships and very hard to overcome. But there are other kinds of betrayals that I've focused on too, that I once did an exercise with men and women, and I read a list of betrayals that men experience, and every time they were lined up in a line, and every time they experienced one of them, they stepped forward. Amazing to see the commonality of many of these. The same with women. Line of women, and every time you identify with one of the betrayals I read, step forward. And so I have now put that into 2 self-quizzes for people, one for men, one for women. And basically it's a way of, and I think there's 40 or 50 items on each. And so if we can put one of those up on the screen, I'll talk about that a minute. The idea is that, again, it helps people name their demons so they can tame them. And if you can name them, then it's much easier to do that. And so here's the female version, wherever betrayed. The first one, felt that my needs came second to those of a man. Did you ever experience that, Ashley?
Yes, I could definitely relate to that one.
Or I'm told that I'm not pretty, or I'm too aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Or criticized or ashamed by a man for expressing my anger.
Mm-hmm.
These are forms of betrayal that women experience.
Mm-hmm.
We're afraid to walk the streets alone at night because I'm a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And these fears, these kind of indications of forms of betrayal are very important. And so I ask people to put a yes next to the ones that I identify with, and then count up the number of yeses. And if you scroll down to the bottom of this inventory, there's a kind of a scale that says interpretation of results. If you had under 10, there's some risk of long-term effects from your past betrayals. But at 11 to 20, there's pretty strong risk. And then 21 plus, it's really high risk of possible long-term effects from past betrayals. So what are the long-term effects of past betrayals? Well, the way I look at betrayal is that it destroys trust in relationships. And it destroys trust when you look at all these different kinds through maybe 1,000 little cuts or small betrayals that end up to you feeling like I can't trust this person. And so that's really what I see happening in a lot of the relationships that I deal with. People who've had perhaps a long-term experience with betrayal. Although, again, if you were betrayed in the past, likely that's going to be drawn into your current relationship when the relationship gets close enough and safe enough. And so you will attract betrayals if you don't resolve them. And so the obvious way to avoid that is resolve them or resolve the conflicts around them. So I'm saying to people that that this kind of understanding of what betrayal is all about, and I'll talk more about what it means and how to work through it. But what happens when people are betrayed? Unfortunately, there's 6 ways that they try to deal with it, none of which are effective. And so I'd like to just mention what doesn't work. And the first one, and the one that is most used, is revenge. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you. How many times have you heard that one?
Many times, and I feel like sometimes I even default to that response a lot of the times.
It is the first, and it's even actually in the Bible. It's called the Talionic response. It's called the eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Mm-hmm. That if you were hurt, you have the right then to hurt somebody back. And so that's the first one that really, and it also leads to a lot of energy put into plotting revenge. I mean, it may not be easy to execute revenge, and so you have to figure out the best way, to get back at them. And that takes an awful lot of energy and leads to no growth in consciousness at all. The second way is what I call splitting. If you saw the other person as being all good, now they are all bad. You split against them. And the third one is related to that, and it's denial of their worth ever. They now were a worthless human being. I don't know why I was in relationship with them, and I'm glad they're out of my life. And that one doesn't work either. And then another one, which is really, I think, the most devastating and dangerous one, is people get cynical when after they've been betrayed. Their trust in everything starts to crumble, and they get cynical about life in general. They get cynical about the government, about their work, their relationships, everything. And so that kind of state of consciousness just drags you down and down and down and down. The word cynic comes from a Greek word meaning dog. It's like you're getting down with the dogs when you're getting cynical. And then another one that people have as an outcome of betrayal is they get paranoid, and they start to put tests up for their partner. They have to jump through hoops in order for me to trust them again. You're shaking your head. If you want to add anything to this, go ahead.
I am going through all of the things I think about when I think of any kind of betrayal I've gotten in my life, and all of these things are just really pinpointing, like you said, that knee-jerk reaction of how you oftentimes choose to resolve these types of betrayal. And I'm really excited to get to the next step of this, which I think is going to be more helpful.
There's one more that is on the ineffective list, and that is self-betrayal.
Yes.
You start to distrust yourself and say, how could I have been so stupid to have gotten in relationship with that jerk? And none of those really resolve anything except to cause a lot of internal turmoil and conflict inside yourself, and usually does not lead to any kind of new thinking about the conflict and about the betrayal. So what do you do that's more effective? Well, the first thing I say is write all of them down, all the times you've ever been betrayed in your life, and look for patterns. Because as I said, behavior that doesn't get resolved will show up again and again and again. So when I did that, I had over 2 pages of betrayals, and I saw the pattern right away. It was all women who had betrayed me in my life, and all kinds of close relationships where I had gotten betrayed. So that's the first step, is look for patterns. Then you know where, if you don't do it, it's going to show up there again if you don't resolve it. So that's the first step. And then I think it's important for people to realize that, as I said, the natural tendency, if you had betrayals in the past that you haven't healed, you're going to attract them again. So in essence, you have a part to play in the betrayal. I mean, you contributed something to that, even if it's other betrayals you never healed, and now I've showed up again. And so the important part of it is not to put all the blame on the other person, but look at what your responsibility was. Maybe there were early warning signals that you totally had a blind spot to and ignored because of past betrayals where that happened, where you didn't pay attention enough to what was going on. So I call it developing compassion for yourself and the other person, and understanding the betrayal from a larger perspective, that there are forces sometimes at play in a betrayal that we don't have much control over, except to now understand them and learn the lessons from them so we don't repeat them again. So that's the main way you handle betrayals, is look at what was part of this that was unfinished from the past and get that finished so it doesn't happen again. And it generally, the unfinished business part of any conflict, or particularly betrayal conflicts, are 4 things. Either you could have said something that might have helped and might have changed it, or you could have done something that might have changed it. Or the other person could have said something or done something that might have changed the whole thing. And those are usually the unfinished business that has to be finished before you can avoid having that happen again in your life. So that is part of what I guess in that sense, you have to ask your question: who was the betrayer? How much did I contribute to the betrayal by my own blind spots, for example? That doesn't excuse the betrayer. It just says, I see where I may have missed some things that could have maybe headed this off at the pass, and I didn't. So then after that, we come to the biggie, which is forgiveness. Forgiving yourself and others. Now, it's pretty damn hard to forgive somebody who's really betrayed you. It takes a lot of kind of looking at it from a larger perspective, looking at some of the things I've just said. What did I contribute? What are the patterns that I brought to this relationship on my betrayals from the past? All of that adds into the whole process of forgiveness. And the word forgive, interestingly, means to give back. I mean, there are religious meanings to forgiveness and all that, but turn the other cheek and everything. But in a psychological way, it means forgive, give back. So what you're really doing in a forgiveness is giving back to yourself what you learned about yourself in this betrayal, as a result of the betrayal, and giving back to the other person anything that you took on as your responsibility and that wasn't yours. It was that other person's. And so it's getting a clear line about what was mine, what was yours. That's the give back process that I see. And so it's forgiveness is a high quality process. And there's a lot of there's a couple of protocols in the book about how to do that. There's a whole chapter on forgiveness in the Intimate Combat book, and on betrayal rather, and then there's a part on forgiveness as a way to go through it. But also, it's important to understand what forgiveness is not, and it's not ego gratification. I'm so great, I'm just going to forgive you. I've risen above all this nonsense, and I'm just going to forgive you. That's bullshit, plain and simple. It doesn't work, and it isn't what, in my heart of hearts, is what forgiveness means. It also does not condone the behavior of the other person. You can forgive them and still hold them responsible for what they did. I mean, it doesn't change that at all. It just changes your energy and your approach to it. And that's the most important part. And then it also does not determine what the relationship might be that you might have with the betrayer after the betrayal. I mean, that's still a matter of choice. You can forgive someone and never speak to them, or forgive them and get back in relationship with them. And that's a range of options between those two. So what is true forgiveness? Well, it's a deep psychological process that actually increases your PsyQ. Last month, I talked about how people can develop their PSYQ, their PsyQ, their psychological intelligence. And obviously, a betrayal is an opportunity to increase your psychological intelligence, to understand how you might have drawn that to you, what kind of reactions you had to it, how you can find a place for it in your heart, and how you can forgive. So it's really an opportunity to expand your consciousness, and then it provides an opportunity to learn what you hadn't learned before in your betrayals. So that's probably the biggest part of forgiveness, is that it's part of a process of saying, this stops here. I now know what I have been doing all along that's keeping betrayals alive in my life, and they're going to stop now. And this is how I'm going to deal with them. This is how I'm going to finish whatever wasn't finished before. So it liberates you from seeing yourself as a victim. That's the other big one, because a lot of people who are betrayed go into victimhood, and they curl up in a corner and suck their thumb and hope the world will take care of them. Well, that doesn't happen. Obviously, that's not a good option. I have a client who just ended a 10-year relationship. Her partner ended it, and she felt betrayed. But and she said, I could have been one of those people who felt like a victim, but I didn't feel I was going to do that. And she went out and got herself a new job, moved to another city, bought a house in the new city, and is moving on with her life. Not that she just still doesn't have some grief from time to time and feel lonely from time to time, but she mobilized herself instead of becoming immobilized by the betrayal. And that's the worst thing that can happen, if you just become totally immobilized by your reaction to it. And then it also helps you tame your demons. Betrayal is a demon, and you no longer have to carry that negative energy that demon held in your life, and that's the biggest part of it. So it really prevents your natural learning style from causing you to continue to have betrayals over and over again. And it took me a while to learn that. I had 2 pages of betrayal before I learned that. Any comments about that?
Yes, I'm very eager now to kind of go through this process myself, because I've always considered the forgiveness part the most difficult. And I think a lot of the times we avoid it. And again, we revert back to what's easier, because it can be, some lengthy processes to work through.
Yeah.
Like you said, listing it out and going through all those steps of, between the acknowledgement and figuring out, who or who not was assigned to the conflict and the betrayal, and then again, giving back, and letting go, and processing that in a way that allows you to then kind of disrupt that pattern.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a restoring trust, not in other people, but in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part of the whole forgiveness process that people miss, is that when I forgive, I'm also in that process restoring my trust in myself.
Exactly.
That I can come out of this. Whenever I've had a major betrayal or conflict in my life, I always ask myself, do I want to come out of this worse off or better off? Well, of course, the answer is always better off. Well, then I have to say, okay, what can I do to make sure that I come out better off than worse off in this?
Mm-hmm.
So then I take the actions I need to do to come out of it better off. And every betrayal, every major conflict I've had in my life, I've always managed to come out of it better off in some way. In some ways, it hurts, and it takes its toll. But in other ways, I have found how to mobilize myself and be able to move on with my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's very powerful.
That's about what I want to say about betrayals and that inner demon. Again, if you can begin to understand it, how it happens, and how you may have inadvertently contributed to it happening by your own history of unhealed or unresolved behavioral or betrayal conflicts, that could have drawn that into your relationship, and it's really also I think it does increase our better understanding of ourselves, our psychological intelligence. If we do the work around a betrayal, it's an opportunity, I say, to do work on yourself, and it can, and it often does, even if in cases where couples come back together after a major betrayal, they come back from a different place, much closer, and have much better understanding of each other and themselves. So it can deepen the relationship. A challenge like a betrayal, if met and dealt with effectively, can deepen a person's relationship, a couple's relationship. And I've often seen that happen.
I can see that would be true. Oftentimes the challenges and getting through the other side really do strengthen the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. So next time I'm going to challenge another inner demon. And this is a big one. And this is shame.
Mm.
And so next episode, next week, I'm going to talk about how that happens, how it affects relationships, and what to do about it.
I'm looking forward to that one a lot too. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. As always, all of the self-quizzes and guides that Dr. Weinhold references can be downloaded at the link in the show notes of today's podcast. And we thank everyone so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, Ashley.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at CICRCL.org or click the link in the show notes.